Hey, it's Aiden for Complex News. Over the past few months, Market, formerly known as Chinatown Market, has come under fire for appropriating the life and legacy of various Chinatowns across the country. The bootleg, tongue-in-cheek personality we've come to associate with Chinatown Market dilutes Chinatown's complex and proud history into a commercial punchline. Social media watchdog Diet Prada amplified the outcry surrounding the controversy, pushing the discussion further into the public eye. We sat down with Mike Cherman at Market's new LA HQ to discuss his experience changing his brand's name. We get insight on how he dealt with the initial outcry and what his current thoughts are on streetwear accountability. Before we dive in, for the purpose of contextualizing our conversation, could you give me a little bit of history of your brand Market and its origins as Chinatown Market?
Of course, man. I mean, you know, it's funny with looking back at the start of the brand, it was a friend of mine called me one morning and he goes, I want to make some shirts that say, fuck you, you fucking fuck. So for lack of, cursing a lot, that's a classic New York City Canal Street t-shirt, which is sold in all those kind of like t-shirt shops that sell I Love New York and the just the classic fun tongue-in-cheek, the bootlegs, all that. And I think when he came through and wanted to make that, it became, oh, let's make a thank you, have a nice day shirt. Let's make a smiley face shirt. Let's make a, all these things that I think were like riffing off of the energy of a lot of those like t-shirt shops on Canal Street. And I think within 5 minutes, we were like, let's just call it Chinatown Market, and it was one of those moments where it just like culminated a lot of things together. There was not a lot of thought in the name. And all of a sudden we were on this path of like, oh, this could be something real. If I just took these things in pop culture, smashed them together, did it legally, we could have something pretty special here. But I don't think at the time that I had recognized like what was to come, the business that we were gonna have, et cetera, And I think just recognizing that Chinatown wasn't a name for us to own or for us to have. And I think recognizing that as we move forward into the future and, doing the right thing is key.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Yeah. Can we expect an evolution of the brand or a new direction or new identity with the name change, or will the fundamental ethos of Market remain the same?
I mean, the fundamental ethos will definitely stay the same, but I think that at a core, we want to continue to use our platform to showcase not only the team that's in here, but the community that we've been building. I think we recognize that we're, one of the only things in streetwear that is not about trying to be super exclusive and transactional. It's about bringing kids in, creating that community, et cetera. So, we have a lot of exciting things. I'm hyped to let the people see. I think that, in due time, and right now it's just doubling down on who we are and making sure that we continue to invest in the people that have made us who we are today. And that's the team within here, and it's the community that supports us.
100%. Speaking of social media, how do you feel about social media watchdogs like Diet Prada, or people who can, they're swift and pretty thorough when it comes to calling people out or amplifying, controversy that's happening in the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine, right? Like, people are able to call it whoever they want, and I think it's good to have accountability. But I also think that it's good to just make sure there's conversation, right?
Sure.
I think like the only thing I'd ever hope for the world is that, I think, yes, stop things that are bad, but I also think that if people can't come to a further end of these things to learn and see that humans can grow and develop, then we've all lost sight of who we are as humans. No one's perfect and everyone's made mistakes. So I only hope out of all of the, the watchdogs, this whole thing, it's I don't think that people should get away with bad things. I don't think that bad humans should be able to just thrive, you're right? But I also believe that we're all human, we all make mistakes, and I think we can all learn and get better. That's a key thing that everyone's got to remember, because we're not perfect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you feel like they sort of painted you guys with a broad brush?
I mean, that's to interpretation, I think for me, it was about the name that we owned that was not okay and was not for us, it was something that we had to acknowledge. But I think when you also take a step back, I wasn't trying to go and make product that was deliberately, disrespecting, but with all that said, it doesn't matter because the name was confusing in the first place. So to me, that was number one about us acknowledging it. I think it's hard to have those battles at broad strokes, right? Because it's not about that. It's about recognizing, are you making it confusing for a group of people who actually went through a struggle? Chinatowns weren't a place that you chose to live. It was a place that you were forced to live in, that families immigrated and were forced to live in. And in reality, when you take a step back and you look at all those things, this is not for me to own. And as much as I might have started it without any bad intention around these things, that doesn't make it okay,
Welcome to Chinatown is a grassroots initiative that works to support Chinatown businesses and amplify community voices. Their work helps generate the much-needed momentum to preserve one of New York's most vibrant neighborhoods. We met up with them at Lantern Candlelight on Mulberry Street in New York's Chinatown to learn their perspective on the situation, as well as their experience landing on a new name with Mike and his team.
Welcome to Chinatown. We are a hyper-local grassroots organization that's focused on community preservation of Manhattan's Chinatown by empowering its small business owners. Started because myself and my good friend Jennifer Tam, we were Chinatown residents and started to feel the decline. So we started to feel that more and more, and when you see the rhetoric that was in the news about this being the Wuhan virus, the Kung Flu virus, we knew that this could be something that if people don't get involved, it could really accelerate the gentrification of Chinatown. When Jen and we started Welcome to Chinatown, it was based on the horrible and really ignorant narrative that had been put on this community. And it's not a narrative that's unfamiliar. It almost seems cyclical when you see, for example, like SARS. I remember my parents having to deal with that type of racism as well. And as we started Welcome to Chinatown, we really wanted to change that narrative that the community is transactional, that there's a lot more to see for the business owners and what has been built in this community on immigrant grit, on the hard work, and on these generational values.
How did Chinatown Market, or formerly known as Chinatown Market, now Market, first come onto your radar, and what was your first reaction to the name Chinatown Market?
Yeah, even though it may not seem like that streetwear culture and pop culture is a part of Welcome to Chinatown's ethos, it is in the sense of our volunteer base. Our volunteer base is pretty young, diverse, and many of them grew up in New York City, which is, it's a part, streetwear is a part of New York City culture. So I would say the majority of our volunteers knew about Chinatown Market. They knew about what that brand meant and the feeling of why is this brand here when it's not really for the community, by the community. So when we saw a brand like Chinatown Market, quite frankly, it was pretty insulting. And so there was definitely there wasn't any love for that Chinatown Market name. And when Mike and Dan reached out, we were pretty taken aback. That wasn't something that we were expecting.
What was the reaction like when they first reached out to work with you guys?
They reached out, and I give them credit for that, to be able to reach out and say that we want to have the conversation. When we heard that conversation, we were skeptical. There's so much performatism that is going on between brands, social media, and it's hard to discern whether this was truly an authentic conversation. But ultimately, I think both of us feel very firmly about cancel culture, and that if cancel culture isn't going to lead to any type of change, then why engage in this at all? If you want to support the community, what is it in a way that aligns with your own personal values, aligns with our mission, and feels right to continue to do this in the long term? Don't be like that mahjong line with the elevate Asian culture, or that Karen and Kanji, like, stop trying to elevate other people's culture.
In this process, what was it like working with leaders in the AAPI community like Eddie Huang, Welcome to Chinatown, to sort of, guide this decision-making process?
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, it started with our team internally, making sure that I wasn't just a decision that I made, but I think it's something that we sat with our whole team, make sure we got everyone's feedback. This is a community, it's not a dictatorship, and I think for me, through this whole process, talking to leaders, talking to different people, we had to just make sure that we were getting the feedback, making sure that through this process we were actually giving back, able to affect the community and do what we had to do, because unfortunately during COVID we can't just go fly to New York and go do workshops and help try to enrich underserved neighborhoods, etc. I think that through this it's been just how do we help, and I think through all of this it was communication and just making sure we're having the hard conversations, just like we're having conversations with people who are here to empower and make sure that we're getting things done, and I think that's been key for us. Is it's not about the easy stuff, it's about the hard conversations, because that's the only way we learn, it's the only way that this business develops and learns from its past.
Yeah. Do you feel like streetwear, with its sort of history and insurgency and representing marginalized people, do you feel like there is a responsibility to advocate for social changes?
Of course, I think it's key, whether it's like who you have working on projects or like why, and I think that it's just really important to make sure that you have the right background for it. And I mean, with any of this stuff, it's about approach, you know, and making sure that like from the team that worked on it to the voices that are being, you know, showcased on the platform, to all of that, you have to be doing that every day, you know. And I think we have an accountability to our community that supports us and making sure that we're not only creating great products, because that's, you know, what we do as a business, but making sure we're setting an example for our community as a whole. And so I think, you know, in a retrospect to everything that we went through, et cetera, it's like we had to be that example, and we had to make sure we're taking steps with thought and with, you know, real like respect, you know. And so I think that was key through all of this, was to make sure that we're setting an example for, you know, how this can be done. I mean, it wasn't done with that kind of intention, but I think like you got to listen to the people and have your ear out before you just go talk and kind of defend yourself. And I think that was the last thing that we wanted to do.
These discussions all approach a philosophical question lining a greater conversation about streetwear. Are streetwear brands responsible for advocating for social change? Considering its insurgent history, are labels beholden to anything outside of a well-designed product? My answer is yes, absolutely. Streetwear first felt its breath of life when marginalized groups, disenfranchised kids, and social outcasts built communities around radical, anti-authoritarian ideas. Streetwear became the medium to say something. It was empowering, it was inclusive in ways that Hollister, Abercrombie, and Zara could never be. Despite streetwear's ubiquity today, there's still a responsibility to build community, much less appropriate one whose history far exceeds even the notion of a graphic tee. Bobby Hundred says it best when he writes that once you carve out your community, it's up to you to invite people in. That's all I got on this. Feel free to let me know how you feel on this topic.